This is the response to the video, Signs and the Dead Alive. Now the problem is that you're using the Bible to justify the veracity of the Bible. Your confidence is no more or less than anyone else from any other religion who justifies their holy book by pointing to the signs claimed to have happened in that book. Unfortunately, the people writing the holy books have a vested interest in having those books be believed. There are no independent sources. There is no other contemporary evidence from around the year 30 AD to suggest that anything out of the ordinary happened. It would be utterly amazing to anyone who heard of it that a man could rise from the dead. I know I would mention it if I knew about it. Not to mention all the other impossible feats he was supposed to be performing around the time. How odd is it then that we don't have any other sources than second-hand accounts, despite the number of historians writing at the time? The accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were not written down until decades after Jesus died, plenty of time for hearsay to be laid down, and no other major historians mentioned this preacher with supernatural powers. Why? You say, Jesus rose from the dead and many people are not persuaded. Why? You assume, of course, that people have any good reason to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. As I addressed a minute ago, the only information we have comes from 4 second-hand stories, which, incidentally, are likely actually from the same source, which is lost to history now, and biblical scholars refer to it as Q. None of the other historians writing at the time had any inkling that anything supernatural was going on. I presume that as a Christian, you do not believe that Muhammad rode to heaven on a flying horse. Although I can't be sure of your reasons for not believing this, I will tentatively assume that among those reasons is the fact that the Quran is the only source that confirms this fact. It would be as if I wrote a book saying that my friend Joe shot lasers out of his eyes, but he can never do it again, and no one in our neighborhood saw him do it, just us. You would be suspicious of my claims, and rightly so. My point is that just as you require some objective confirmation to believe something that defies physical laws, so do I. All you've got is your own holy book, and its interests are unfortunately quite vested in this matter. You say, and I quote, "Is it hard to believe in God and what's actually going on?" As if those two things necessarily go together. Why should they? God and what's actually going on. You certainly have nothing other than your book and your faith to suggest that God has anything to do with what's going on in the world. Why should other people who are not from your faith believe you? You offer nothing compelling. If I were to step into a court of law, accused of drunk driving, and my defense was that I didn't hurt anybody because God was watching over my vehicle, I would be rightly thought to be insane and guilty, and I'd be thrown in jail. There's simply no reason, other than wishful thinking, to suspect that anything supernatural occurs in this world. The world obeys natural laws, and we can predict them nicely. So where does the God part come in? You say, if you think there's no proof of God, and then you list a series of things that you seem to think count as proof of the supernatural. Now, in general regard to all the pieces you lay forth, I have to point out that none of them requires divine intervention. They are perfectly possible without involving the supernatural. The rules of our world work just fine. Specifically, though, even if natural laws were somehow being circumvented, your point would still be invalid because you actually make a logical fallacy in each point. First, evolution. It's not a contentious topic among scientists. It just isn't. It is a useful, parsimonious theory that could be falsified if we found certain fossils or animals, but so far, it predicted everything that we found. I know you may have been told otherwise, but I encourage you to delve into the scientific literature for yourself. Debates over the precise minutiae and the mechanisms of evolution do take place in biological science, just as such debates take place in every branch of science. That's how science moves forward, a constant questioning and revision process. However, no scientist who has seen the data doubts the actual occurrence of evolution, just the details, such as whether the process was consistent or marked by punctuated equilibrium. Again, if you're unsure of what I mean, I urge you to search databases of biological research. In one of the largest, Article First, a search for the term evolution returns over 180,000 results. I challenge you to bring forth one article accepted to a legitimate scientific journal that disproves the theory of evolution. It wouldn't be hard. There are hundreds of ways evolution could be disproved, countless findings that could demonstrate it to be false, but it just never seems to happen. Please, I ask you, try and find one. I promise that you will win the Nobel Prize for disproving something so well accepted in the scientific literature, the way Einstein did for disproving the previous theory of physics as set forth by Isaac Newton. Second, Israel in trouble. Well, Israel is in trouble due to what's called a self-fulfilling prophecy, one that's set up to work the way it says it will. If a teacher tells a kid that they're stupid and that they're going to do bad on a math test, the poor kid might believe the teacher. The kid might study less because, well, it's just not worth it. I'm just too dumb. Also, he might be nervous during the test, thinking he's going to do bad. Therefore, he will do bad, simply because of the teacher's act of telling him. It's not that the teacher predicted it, he didn't have any precognitive powers. The actual act of predicting it is what caused it. This has been researched. Random kids were picked out of a class, and the teacher was told that some were exceptionally bright, some exceptionally dull. Like I said, they were randomly selected. Their abilities weren't even tested beforehand, totally random. At the end of the year, the ones who were predicted to be brighter actually did better, because the teachers treated them as bright kids. Unfortunately, the opposite was also true. The teacher who thought there was no hope for the dull kids, the kids actually came out worse for it. This is what a self-fulfilling prophecy is. The same thing is happening in Israel. It's contentious because Scripture said it would be contentious, causing people to fight over it, believing it to be holy land and somehow different and more important than other land. It's in trouble because it was said to be important, a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the prophecy had been made in secret and lay hidden in a book buried underground for the last 2,000 years, no one would care what happened to the Middle East. Have you ever read the Harry Potter series? You might remember that Voldemort makes this same mistake in Book 5, putting too much stock by the prophecy and setting up his own demise. Third, finally, society. Failing? Hardly. Modern society has unsurpassed standard of living. Our lifespan is much improved. Education is growing more and more widespread. Things aren't perfect yet. There are many countries that need to be brought up to first world standards, and we do have a long way to go, but society's far from failing. Throughout history, we've had some ups and downs, but the overall trajectory has been up. We're living longer, happier lives. Painful institutions like slavery and forced marriage are on the decline. People are actually getting to choose what they want to do with their lives. Life isn't perfect, but to suggest that we'd be better off at an earlier time in history is downright laughable. Why would we ever want to go back to not knowing how to treat illness? Back to living in cold, muddy houses? We should instead be looking forward and trying to bring these amenities to more people in the world. Now, in my high school religion class, we read a fictional newspaper headline that read, "Disease ravages the country. Government fails to protect citizens from crime. War in the Middle East." The catch, as my religion teacher explained, was that the headline could have either appeared in 1000 AD or 2000 AD and been equally accurate. There's this unfortunate tendency to see things as worse than they really are. It's important sometimes to step back and realize that we've improved in a measurable way, and will keep doing so as long as science and free inquiry are allowed to continue. Peace.